Hello, nerds. My name is Brandon, and unlike you, I don't work in scientific fields. I don't have letters after my name. I didn't get a degree. But what I do have is some real world experience with chemistry, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. Pardon my probably misspelling in some of these things and sloppy handwriting. I do my best, but let's get into it. The chemistry I'm referring to is propane and propane accessories. I used to work at a store that was partial camping supply, and we used to refill propane in propane tanks. So I have had real world experience with this, and I would like to share my experience and knowledge with you. As you can see here, this is propane. It is commonly used for many things, such as heating, for grilling, and for you probably have scientific uses for it. But I'm here to share my experiences with propane and probably give you some information you didn't know about propane and propane tanks. As many of you probably know, propane is actually a liquid. Liquid form is in negative 44 degrees Fahrenheit and negative 42.22 degrees Celsius. Its boiling point, which it becomes a gas, is only negative 43.6 degrees Fahrenheit and negative 42 degrees Celsius. I had many people who, when I was filling their tanks, would ask how much gas you're putting in there. And I would often say, it's actually liquid that we're putting in there. It only becomes a gas at its boiling point. And that's why when you move around a propane tank, you hear that sloshy, splashy sound, which many people didn't realize. One disclaimer before. I live in New York State, and these are the regulations for most of the US and New York State. I am not sure if they are for the world, it may differ, but this is what I had to deal with. What you see here is a standard propane tank. It contains 4.7 gallons of propane. It weighs 20 pounds-ish when empty and about 37-ish pounds when completely full of propane. This is the most common propane tank people use to fill, and it's what most people put on their grills and such. This propane tank has many features. The first one, the most important, is the certification date. The certification date is often found on the ring of the tank, and it normally goes as the month and then the year. Most tanks will have it there or somewhere around the ring on the inside or the outside. It's very important that you know your certification date on your tanks because surprisingly, people don't know that tanks expire. And people were always like, metal doesn't expire. Yes, metal doesn't expire technically, but it does rust and things wear out. And this was a common issue we would have that people don't know. Because you're not legally allowed to refill a tank that's not certified. Certification happens at the manufacturing date, and after that, it is 12 years from the manufacturing date that tank is certified, unless, of course, something else happens. Once that tank has hit its 12-year mark, the tank must be sent in and be recertified and maintained. This normally makes the tank good up for 5 years, and then it'd have to be recertified again. A tank can be very old as long as it's recertified and continues to work. Every time they recertify, they change the stamp date. Often there's a small little R circle that indicates that it's been recertified. One of the most important things on a tank is the bleeder. It's normally a small screw that's inside this tank that you would have to open with a screwdriver. On some there's a little knob that you can turn. The bleeder lets out the pressure for the tank. This is a standard tank, and often the bleeder is not needed to be open unless there's too much pressure in the tank. On other size tanks, the bleeder is much more important, but I'll get to that. Now, up here we have the valve, and the valve is obviously a valve, and Then there's the actual attachment point for refilling the propane and hooking it to hoses. But there's one very important thing about the valve, especially in standard tanks. They contain an OPD, overflow prevention device, or overfill prevention device. This device will often is very important in safety. Often it will turn off the machine once the limit has been reached. Now, this standard tank isn't always the tank that everybody has. As you see here, I have a drawing of a 100-pound tank, and I have noted some three things. When filling these tanks, it is very important that you open that bleeder. That bleeder will be on the top of the nozzle. Often it needs a screwdriver, like I said, or you can sometimes have a little knob on it that'll open up. When you are filling these tanks, it is utmost importance that that bleeder always be open. Because when the tank is filling and it's getting near full point, the white spray will come out, that is the propane escaping, and that will indicate that the propane is near full, and you shouldn't overfill. But another thing very important to remember, in case there is a bleeder issue that you're unaware of, is to watch the weight of the tank when filling it, and you keep it on the scale and make sure it's filling to the proper weight that it should be when it's full, and the amount of gallons that you're putting in. Most machines have a scale built in, this red thing right here, that the tank sits on to be weighed. And then the hose is attached to a counter that counts the amount of gallons. The bleeder, the counter, and the scale are all important because they are all safety measures that are used for propane. These are some of the most important things because if one of these things were to fail, hopefully these two other things would stop from overfilling and danger. These are the four most common types of tanks that most people have and bring to be refilled. You've got your standard tank, which is 20-pound tank, and standard and takes 4.6 to 4.7 gallons. This tank is the tank that has the OPD and is often what you use to grill. The 30-pound tank is what is mostly put on forklifts. This tank does not have an OPD and would be filled with the use of the bleeder, the weight, and the amount of gallons. It normally takes 6.8 gallons of propane. The 40-pound tank is normally what you find on a camper. This tank can actually just look like a bigger version of the standard 20-pound tank, and some of them do nowadays come with an OPD, but it's often considered just to use the weight, the bleeder, and the amount that you put in of gallons to be safe. This takes 9.2 gallons. The 100-pound tank is often used for heating homes or other environments. This is the biggest and heaviest bastard to do, and it takes 22.9 gallons of propane. One very important thing to remember is these small green and blue tanks that are often bought in like 2-packs or as single tanks at stores for small gas grills are not refillable. Some of the most common issues when dealing with propane tanks are bad valve. A lot of times it's pretty self-explanatory. The valve was bad and the propane tank would leak. On rare occasions, you'd fill the propane tank and suddenly you'd hear a hissing sound and you'd see it leaking out through the valve. On other occasions, the valve literally came off due to corrosion and the propane tank not being restored. I at least had 2 of these happen to me. Another issue is bad OPDs. If you pick up a propane tank and you hear a lot of rattling in there, that means the OPD is busted, and it's not safe to fill. Another one is bad seals. Often the seals would corrode with a little rubber ring, and propane would leak out there. You'd finish filling propane, and You'd hear the hissing of it, or sometimes you'd even see it just shooting out. Another very big thing, especially with people who don't take care of their tanks, is poor tank quality. Often there will be people who have dents in their tanks, big crumples in their tanks, and sometimes even burn damage on their tanks. These tanks are not to be refilled. Their integrity has been compromised, but yet people will still think they're okay to fill. And the final one, and the most important, is expired tanks. People would often be like, well, the metal doesn't expire. It doesn't matter. Legally, and for safety reasons, we can't fill expired tanks that haven't been recertified. There was one point that I had somebody come with a tank that was from 1998 and had not been recertified. They had found it in their dad's garage and was demanding that I fill it. I would not fill it, and they got really pissed and then tried calling my manager. And my manager's like, no, that's legal to fill. You need to get it recertified. I just want to thank you all for watching this goofy little video and hope that I've provided some information or at least killed some time and let you all know about propane. So remember, be safe out there, and propane accessories.